Sara Jacobs of California. Congresswoman, thank you so much for being with us. You do represent a district close to the southern border that Priscilla was just talking about. How are you preparing to prevent those mass deportations that the Trump administration is planning?
Yeah, look, I know the Trump administration is talking about Texas as a model. I think San Diego can be a real model because we have shown that with the right resources, with the right infrastructure, there can actually be an orderly and humane process to address people coming to the border. But I'll be honest, none of these are really solutions to the problem, which is that we haven't fixed our immigration system. We haven't changed it since before I was born. And I'm young, but I am not that young. We do not have an immigration system that actually reflects the needs of our economy, the needs of families. And the Trump administration's plan is to punish individuals in an unprioritized way, in a way that's going to wreak severe havoc on our economy all across the country, let alone in San Diego, where our economy is so tied to Mexico, instead of actually addressing the real problem, which is that we need an immigration system that actually works.
And on that point about your economy being tied to Mexico, I want to ask you about Donald Trump's pledge to impose tariffs, not just on Mexico, but on Canada to the north and China as well. The markets seem to view this as a negotiating ploy, essentially a bluff. Does that suggest that it is unlikely that Trump will follow through with this?
I mean, it's so hard to know what Trump is actually going to do or not do and what he will follow through on. But I can tell you that these kinds of tariffs, even talking about it in this way, is deeply harmful to our economy because people, we're going to start seeing companies raising prices in anticipation of these tariffs, let alone the fact that actually after the pandemic, there was this big push to do what we called friendshoring, or bringing a lot of our supply chains to friendly countries like Mexico and Canada so that we could control the supply chain more, so that we had it closer, we had easier access to it. And this is actually going to harm our national security if it pushes those supply chains away from those countries like Mexico and Canada that are close to us and that we can rely on as friends.
I have to ask you about the international news today, the ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon. I know that you have family in Israel. Are you confident that this truce between Hezbollah and Israel is going to hold, and that Israelis in the northern part of the country will be able to go home?
I am incredibly grateful to the Biden administration for their tireless work to get the ceasefire deal done. It's long been in the works. And I think it's incredibly important. We've seen the harm that civilians have encountered because of this conflict. I feel confident that Israelis will be able to return to northern Israel, that the Lebanese families will be able to return to southern Lebanon, and that we'll be able to see a resolution and cessation of hostilities there in the Lebanese-Israeli border.
To that point, Israel pounded the center of the Lebanese capital, Beirut, today. You've seen over the course of the past few weeks dozens of Lebanese villages being destroyed and thousands of people in Lebanon being killed. And you yourself have spoken out against the U.S. providing offensive weapons to Israel. Do you think that this deal with Hezbollah could have been achieved sooner, or this war prevented altogether, if the U.S. had used its very considerable leverage of that military aid over Israel?
Absolutely. I think that it's important that we recognize that, what powers American strength is our values and our ability to build international coalitions. And we need to make sure that we're living up to those values equally to all of our partners and countries around the world. And so I don't think we should be sending offensive weapons until we get, ceasefire agreements in Lebanon, in Gaza, until we make sure that the Israelis are actually operating in the same way to protect civilian harm that we would. And a lot of our documents show that has not been the case. In fact, we're still seeing not enough aid going into Gaza. And I have real concerns about that, and real concerns what our continued support for offensive weapons means moving forward. Now, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't support Israel.
Right.
I think we should continue providing defensive weapons, Iron Dome, all of that. Right. But we should be more sort of strategic about how we're engaging in this partnership.
Congresswoman Sara Jacobs of California, thanks so much for joining me.